My daughter was struggling to breathe when my mother announced that 13 relatives would be taking over our beach house for 2 weeks. My wife asked them to wait. My father refused. I wrote one word back: fine. It was almost 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, and I was standing in my kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, holding a bag from CVS like it contained something more powerful than children's Tylenol and a bottle of Pedialyte. Sophie, my daughter, was 2 years and 8 months old, and she'd been diagnosed with pneumonia the afternoon before. She was lying on the living room sofa with her cheek pressed into a folded blanket, her face flushed the wrong kind of red, the kind that doesn't come from playing outside. Rachel, my wife, sat beside her with her phone propped against a couch cushion, using the stopwatch to count Sophie's breaths per minute like the pediatrician had shown her. I'd spent the whole day on my knees fixing a client's staircase, and my lower back was telling me about it, but I wasn't about to sleep, not with the doctor's warning still sitting in my chest. If her breathing sped up, if her lips changed color, if she stopped drinking water, we needed to be in the emergency room within the hour. That's when my phone lit up on the counter, the family group chat. My mother, Nancy, had named it Mercer's Summer Week 3 years ago, and it usually just filled up with photos of grilled corn and somebody's dog wearing sunglasses. This time it was different. Friday. All 13 of us are staying at your beach house for 2 weeks. Have everything ready. I read it twice. She hadn't asked if the house was even available. She hadn't asked about Sophie, even though Rachel had posted in that same thread the day before that our daughter was running a fever and we were headed to urgent care. Rachel read it over my shoulder and I felt her go still. She can't be serious, she said quietly, careful not to wake Sophie. She typed back herself because I think she wanted to believe reason would work. Sophie has pneumonia and needs quiet. Could everyone please wait until next week? The reply came fast, not from my mother, from my father, Robert. Marcus already took time off. Everyone made arrangements. Nothing is changing. Marcus is my older brother. He's 51, drives a Chevy Tahoe he can't quite afford, and has never in his life let a stranded relative's medical emergency get in the way of a vacation he's already mentally packed for. My mother added a line right after, something about how they'd bring their own groceries and wouldn't be any trouble to the baby. Never mind that not any trouble apparently meant 13 people, 4 kids, 3 vehicles, and 2 dogs descending on a 3-bedroom lake house. I stood there running the math of every summer before this one. The year they showed up 2 days early without telling us. The year Marcus took the biggest bedroom before we'd even unpacked the car. The year my mother left a grocery list taped to our fridge like I was staff. My father, more than once referring to the place as our spot on the lake, as if he'd ever swung a hammer there. Rachel didn't push me one way or the other. She just looked at Sophie, then at me, and said the thing that mattered most. I am not taking her into a house full of people, not like this. I understood exactly what would happen if I gave in the way I usually did. Rachel would stay behind in Columbus with a sick toddler while I drove 5 hours to play host, mow the lawn, stock the fridge, and smooth things over. That was the arrangement nobody had ever voted on out loud, but everybody in my family had come to expect. I typed one word: fine. Rachel looked over. Fine as in they're coming? I set the phone face down on the counter. No, I said. Fine as in I'm done arguing. I picked up my own phone again, this time to call Jim, the guy who handles the smart lock system on the beach house, and left him a voicemail asking if he could meet me first thing in the morning. The guilt showed up almost instantly, the way it always did. My parents were in their 70s. The trip had been planned. Somebody somewhere was going to tell me I was the villain of this story before the weekend was even over. Then Sophie stirred. Her small hand found my finger and wrapped around it the way it had since she was an infant. "Daddy, stay," she said, barely awake, barely audible. That was it. That was the whole argument, settled in 3 words from a 2-year-old who didn't know anything about beach houses or family group chats, or 20 years of me saying yes. I went upstairs and pulled a duffel bag out of the closet. I packed 2 days of clothes without thinking too hard about it, because thinking too hard was how I always talked myself back into old patterns. Rachel appeared in the doorway, Sophie now asleep against her shoulder. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Make sure the house is ready," I told her. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't getting it ready for my parents. I left Columbus a little before 5 in the morning on Thursday, before the sun had fully cleared the trees along I-90. The drive to New Buffalo, Michigan takes about 5 hours depending on traffic through Chicago, and I had a lot of time to sit with my own decision. My phone kept buzzing the whole way, but it wasn't from anyone asking about Sophie. Buy the 2% milk, not the whole milk. Make sure there are enough bath towels. Clear out the master bedroom for your father. His back's been bad. Check the propane on the grill. Marcus wants to tie the boat up at the dock near the house. Not one message asked how my daughter was doing, not one. I drove in silence for most of it, my right knee stiffening up every time I stopped for gas, a souvenir from 20-some years of ladders and crawl spaces. Somewhere around Gary, Indiana, I caught myself asking a question I didn't love the answer to. Was I protecting my daughter, or was I finally using her illness as an excuse to do something I should have done years ago? I didn't have a clean answer. Maybe it was both. That felt more honest than pretending this was purely about Sophie. The house itself has history that has nothing to do with my side of the family, even though you'd never know it from the way my parents talked about it. It originally belonged to Rachel's parents, built sometime in the late 70s, and it was falling apart by the time they retired to Fort Wayne and signed it over to Rachel. New roof, rebuilt back porch, every room repainted. Years of saving to finally redo the kitchen. Rachel and I put more vacations into fixing that house than we ever spent relaxing in it. My family never contributed a dime. Marcus once told me, and I remember the exact words, "Why would I spend my vacation fixing a vacation house?" Yet somehow he was always the first one through the door once the work was done. Jim met me at the house around 10. He's known my family for years. Watched 3 generations of Mercers tromp in and out of that place every summer. So I could tell my request caught him off guard. "New code on the front door," I told him. "Kill the old guest codes completely. Separate lock for the garage. And I want to check the doorbell cameras working." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. "Family trouble?" "Family boundary," I said. It wasn't clever. It wasn't a speech. It was just true. While he worked, I went through the house myself. Cleared out anything perishable from the fridge. Packed a bag of Sophie's things, a couple of her sippy cups, a blanket that Rachel had left there from our last visit. Brought the porch chairs into the garage because rain was coming, closed the curtains, set the thermostat to its normal low-power setting. I didn't cut the power or the water. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I just wasn't going to open the door. Before I left, I taped a single sheet of paper to the inside of the front window, facing out. House closed. No guests this week. My phone rang as I was locking up. My father. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered anyway. He didn't ask about Sophie either. "Did you stock the freezer?" he said. I told him the house wasn't going to have guests this week. There was a pause, just long enough that I could hear the television in the background at his place. "You don't get to embarrass your mother like this," he said. I felt the old reflex kick in, the one that wanted to apologize on instinct before I'd even finished hearing him out. Then I looked over at the little wooden rocking chair Rachel had bought for Sophie last summer, still sitting by the window where we'd left it. "This isn't about Mom being embarrassed," I said. "My little girl is sick." "Children get sick," he said. "Families adjust." "That's what I'm doing," I told him. I hung up before he could answer. My hand was shaking a little afterward, which surprised me. 47 years old, and a phone call from my father could still do that. On the drive to Fort Wayne to meet Rachel and Sophie at her parents' place, my mother sent the group chat a room assignment list for all 13 people, as if nothing I'd said had registered. Marcus, of course, got the biggest bedroom. I read it sitting in my truck at a rest stop off I-69, and instead of feeling the guilt I expected, I felt something closer to clarity. I opened the lock app on my phone and deleted every remaining guest code one by one until the screen showed a clean list with just my name and Rachel's on it. A notification popped up. All guest access removed. For the first time since that message hit the group chat 2 nights earlier, the quiet coming off that house didn't feel like something I owed anyone an apology for. By Friday afternoon, I was in Fort Wayne with Rachel and Sophie at her parents' place. Sophie's fever had dropped a little overnight, and she'd managed to keep down a few sips of water, which felt like the first good news we'd had in 3 days. Rachel sat with her on the guest bed while I helped my mother-in-law chop vegetables for soup, trying to keep my hands busy so my mind would stop circling back to Columbus. At 3:17 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the doorbell camera at the beach house. I opened it without really thinking, and there they were, 3 vehicles pulling into the driveway. Marcus in his Tahoe, my parents behind him in Robert's Buick Enclave. Behind that, a cousin's SUV towing a little trailer packed with beach chairs and coolers. 13 people climbed out over the next few minutes. Suitcases, grocery bags, pool floats still half inflated, 2 dogs straining on their leashes. I watched it all unfold in silence on a 6-inch screen while standing in someone else's kitchen 5 hours away. At first, they thought the keypad was broken. I could see Marcus punching in numbers, trying again, shaking his head. My mother had her phone out. My father was walking the perimeter of the house, checking for a side door that had never existed. The calls started almost immediately. I let the first 2 go to voicemail. My mother's voice, confused more than angry. "Daniel, the keypad isn't working. Call me back." Then Marcus, sharper. "Very funny. Send me the new code." Then my father, the one that actually got under my skin a little. "Your mother is standing in the heat. Fix this now." I sat there with the phone in my hand, feeling the old pull to just make it stop, to send the code, to smooth it over one more time the way I always had. My parents were in their 70s. There were kids in that group. I didn't want anyone actually stuck or unsafe, so I sent one text to the whole chat, nothing more. "The house is closed. There are hotels in New Buffalo and Michigan City." I told Dad yesterday. I even named 2 hotels I knew had rooms, because whatever else this was, I wasn't trying to strand my own family in a parking lot with no plan. That's when Howard walked over. Howard's our neighbor across the road from the beach house, a retired mechanic who's lived there longer than Rachel's parents owned the place. He doesn't get involved in family stuff, generally keeps to himself, but with 13 people and 3 vehicles blocking half the street, I guess he figured somebody should say something. Marcus asked him if he had a spare key. "I don't," Howard said. "Daniel took the guest code out yesterday." My mother told him this was the family vacation house. Howard corrected her, calm as anything. "It belongs to Rachel. Her folks owned it before her." I heard about this part later, secondhand, but apparently that one sentence landed harder on Marcus than anything I'd said on the phone the day before. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact nobody in my family liked saying out loud. Howard added, "Daniel said the place was closed because his little girl was sick. Figured everybody already knew that." Nobody in that driveway wanted to admit they'd known and come anyway. Somewhere in the middle of all this, one of the dogs knocked over a cooler and sent ice cubes skidding across the gravel. A grocery bag split open and a package of frozen burgers rolled down toward the mailbox. And in the middle of the chaos, one of the kids, I think it was my cousin's son, asked, loud enough for the doorbell mic to catch it clearly, "Uncle Marcus, I thought you said this was our house." Marcus didn't have an answer for that one either. Back in Fort Wayne, Rachel asked if I wanted to call anybody back. "Part of me does," I admitted. She didn't push me toward or away from it. She just reminded me gently that Sophie had finally fallen asleep for the first stretch in almost 2 days. A few minutes later, my father called again, and the ringtone startled Sophie awake. She started crying, this thin, exhausted cry that broke something in my chest a lot faster than any voicemail from my dad ever could. I put the phone on silent. That night, Marcus posted on Facebook, My brother locked our elderly parents and several children out of the family beach house after they drove 5 hours. Some people forget where they came from. No mention of Sophie's pneumonia. No mention that Rachel had asked them to wait. No mention that the house was hers, or that I'd told my father the day before, or that I'd texted them 2 hotel names the second they arrived. Within an hour, relatives I hadn't heard from in months were messaging me. An aunt I actually respect called and asked, "Couldn't you have handled this differently?" I started to wonder if she had a point. That night, Sophie woke up coughing, hard enough that I sat her upright against my chest to help her breathe easier. My phone kept lighting up beside the bed with messages I didn't read. Sophie pressed her face into my shirt and murmured the only thing that mattered. "No loud people, Daddy." I turned the phone off completely. The locks, I realized, had been the easy part. Saturday morning, Sophie's breathing hadn't improved the way the doctor had hoped, so we took her back to urgent care in Fort Wayne. While Rachel filled out paperwork at the front desk, I sat in a plastic chair, scrolling through my phone, and found Marcus's post had already been shared into the extended family group, the one with aunts, uncles, and second cousins I mostly only saw at funerals. Somebody had commented calling me ungrateful. Somebody else had used the word cruel. I sat there in that waiting room seriously considering reopening the house the following week, just to make the noise stop. Rachel came back, sat down beside me, and must have read it on my face, because instead of arguing with me, she reached into her bag and pulled out an old blue binder I hadn't seen in years. I didn't even know she still had it. Inside were receipts, bank statements, copies of checks, screenshots of old text messages asking for loans, notes she'd kept, mostly for our own taxes and budgeting, tracking every dollar I'd ever sent my family's way. "You keep remembering what they needed," she said, flipping it open on her lap. I kept remembering what it cost us. We went through it together, right there in the waiting room, waiting for Sophie's name to be called. The total came to roughly $226,400 over more than 20 years. Cash, materials, direct expenses, and that wasn't counting the thousands of unpaid hours I'd put in with a toolbox in hand. 3 memories stood out as we went through it. In 2008, Marcus came up $34,000 short on keeping his house after a business deal fell apart. My father told me plainly, "You're doing well. Your brother has children." Rachel and I pulled money out of savings we'd been setting aside to redo our own kitchen. Marcus promised to pay it back within 2 years. He never did. A few months later, he bought a used boat. In 2016, Rachel and I had finally planned our own vacation, our first real one in years. 3 days before we were supposed to leave, my parents' garage roof started leaking. My father didn't want to hire anyone. Daniel knows how to do it. I canceled the trip, spent 6 days on that roof, paid for the materials myself. Rachel spent what should have been our anniversary week alone in an empty house. When I apologized afterward, all she said was, "I know you think they need you." And then there was the beach house itself, slowly turned into something that wasn't really Rachel's anymore, even though her name was the only one on the deed. The first summer after her parents signed it over, my mother invited relatives without asking anyone. Nobody objected. I didn't object. And it just became the pattern after that. Marcus brought friends for weekends. My mother kept her own linens in the closet like she lived there. My father called the master bedroom our room. Rachel had quietly become a guest in her own family's house. Sitting there in that binder's arithmetic, I realized the money wasn't actually what hurt the most. What hurt was understanding that I'd spent years buying peace with my parents, using Rachel's time, Rachel's patience, and money that should have belonged to our own small family. I'd always told myself I was the one holding everyone together. I kept telling myself I was helping my family, I said out loud. Rachel didn't look away from me. "You were," she said. "You just forgot Sophie and I were part of it." It wasn't said to wound me. It was just true, and it landed exactly the way true things do. When the doctor cleared Sophie to go home with a new round of medication, I carried her out to the car. She was too tired to even react when I buckled her into the car seat, her head lolling to the side, breath still a little too fast for my comfort. I thought about 13 people trying to walk into that house with dogs barking and suitcases banging against door frames and kids running down the hallway while a 2-year-old struggled to breathe in the next room, and any last doubt about the locks disappeared. That evening, once Sophie was settled, I sent one more message to the family chat. We need one family meeting. 3 weeks from Saturday at my house. I'll explain everything once. After that, the new rules are final. My father replied almost immediately. Good. You owe everyone an apology. I looked over at the blue binder still sitting open on our kitchen table. He still thought I was inviting them over to surrender. 3 weeks later, Sophie was almost back to herself, chasing our neighbor's cat along the fence line and demanding a snack every 20 minutes, like a kid who'd never been sick a day in her life. Watching her run around the backyard made everything that came next a little easier to get through. The meeting happened on a Saturday afternoon at our place in Columbus. Rachel kept the food simple: burgers off the grill, coleslaw, a pitcher of sweet tea, bottled water lined up on the porch railing. Nobody showed up expecting a cookout. They showed up expecting an apology and a reopened beach house. Marcus still hadn't taken down his Facebook post. My father sat down at the patio table first, arms crossed, and got right to it. Before we eat, your mother deserves to hear what you have to say. I didn't argue. I walked around the table and set a small stack of papers next to each adult. The first page had one line at the top: what we paid, what we provided, and what changes now. I told them straight out I wasn't asking anyone to pay a dime back. I just wanted it said once, out loud with numbers attached. $34,000 for Marcus's house deposit, $11,800 in emergency mortgage payments after that, $16,200 in medical and dental costs for my mother over the years, $27,500 in materials for repairs on my parents' house, almost $50,000 in groceries, utilities, repairs, and cleaning tied to the beach house alone. On top of that, smaller loans that never came back. $226,400 total over 20-some years. Marcus said I was treating family like a business transaction. No, I said. A business would have sent invoices. I never did. He pushed back harder, saying the house had been used by the whole family for years, so locking everyone out was cruel. That's when Rachel spoke for the first time. Using something for years doesn't make it yours. She set a printed text message in front of him, one he'd sent the summer before. Tell Rachel to clear her stuff out of the master closet before we arrive. Why was I supposed to clear my belongings out of a house my parents gave me, she asked him. He didn't have an answer. I told him I wanted the Facebook post taken down, or at least corrected. He said it reflected how he honestly felt in the moment. Then leave it up, I said, but I'm posting the group chat underneath it. Marcus went quiet. He knew exactly what was in that thread. Rachel's message about Sophie's pneumonia, my father's reply that nothing was changing. One of my aunts, sitting a few chairs down, looked at him and said, "You left that part out?" Marcus muttered something about Facebook not being the place for every detail. Apparently, it was the place for every detail that made Daniel look bad, she said. My father tried a different angle. After everything we did for you, this is how you treat us? I didn't deny they'd raised me, fed me, gotten me through school. You raised me. I'm grateful, I said. But that doesn't give you a lifetime claim on my wife's house, our money, or our time. My mother's voice cracked a little. We were only trying to keep everyone together. Rachel answered that one, calm as ever. You tried to bring 13 people into a house while our 2-year-old had pneumonia. That wasn't keeping us together. That was telling us we didn't matter. My mother started crying, and something in me wanted to take it all back right there. Tell her I was sorry. Pour her some tea. Let the whole thing dissolve the way family arguments in our house always used to. But then I thought about Sophie flinching at a ringing phone, whispering, "No loud people," and I stayed put. I laid out the new terms. Nobody uses the beach house without both Rachel and me inviting them. No more self-scheduled trips onto property that isn't theirs. No more informal loans with no paper trail. I'd still help with real medical emergencies, but I was done covering Marcus's lifestyle. And anyone who used Sophie's illness as leverage again would lose the right to visit at all. My father asked if I was choosing her family over my own. I looked through the kitchen window at Rachel's parents' faces from Fort Wayne. No, at Rachel and Sophie, stacking blocks together in the living room. I'm choosing the family I'm responsible for, I told him. Then I asked one last question. Can you name one time you asked Rachel before inviting people to her beach house? He didn't answer. I looked at my mother. Nothing. Even Marcus came up empty. Nobody yelled. Nobody needed to. The silence said everything I'd spent 3 weeks trying to put into words. That's why the locks changed, I said. Marcus deleted the post right there at the table, not because he changed his mind about any of it, but because he didn't want that group chat screenshot going up under it. Before he left, my father told me I'd torn the family apart. No, Dad, I said. I stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. Marcus didn't speak to me for almost 5 months after that afternoon in our backyard. That part still stings more than I expected it to. He'd taken advantage of me for years, sure, but he was still my brother, and there were nights I lay awake wondering if I could have drawn the same line without drawing so much blood along with it. What I noticed, though, was how much lighter the rest of our life felt once the bleeding stopped. Money that used to disappear into other people's emergencies started staying in our own account. Rachel and I actually took a long weekend that spring, just the two of us and Sophie. No garage roofs waiting to be fixed. No last-minute grocery lists taped to a fridge that wasn't even ours to stock. My knee still ached most evenings, and my lower back still had opinions about ladders. But at least I wasn't spending my weekends fixing things for free anymore. My relationship with my parents didn't heal in any clean way, and I stopped expecting it to. My father never apologized. Not once. My mother sent stiff, careful texts around the holidays, the kind that read more like obligation than warmth. I didn't cut them off completely. I still called to check in, still asked about doctor's appointments, but I stopped being the automatic answer to every problem that showed up in their lives. When my father's car broke down that winter, I gave him the number of a good mechanic instead of driving over with my toolbox. He wasn't thrilled about it. He handled it anyway. About 6 months after that backyard conversation, my phone rang and it was my mother. I braced myself the way I always used to before answering her calls. She didn't say, "We're coming Saturday." She didn't announce anything. "Would it be all right?" she said, hesitating in a way I genuinely never heard from her before. "If your father and I came by Sunday afternoon?" It wasn't an apology. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't some movie moment where everything got resolved in one phone call. But it was the first time in as long as I could remember that she'd actually asked. I looked over at Rachel, who was folding laundry on the couch, and she gave me a small nod. "Sunday from 2 to 5 works," I told my mother. "Sophie naps before that." "We'll come after her nap," she said. Small, almost nothing really if you didn't know our history. But it was real. The following spring, the three of us drove back out to the beach house for the first time since that Friday the year before. Sophie was 3 now, steady on her feet, and she ran straight down to the sand with a yellow plastic bucket like she owned the place, which in a way that finally meant something, she did. Rachel sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching her dig a hole way too big for that little shovel. I walked up to the front door before we went in and checked the lock. Out of habit more than anything else. It didn't feel like a weapon anymore. It was just a lock. The same thing every house has. The plain, ordinary right to decide who gets to walk through your own front door. I've thought a lot about what the real payoff was in all of this. It wasn't the number in that binder, and it wasn't the image of 13 people standing confused in a driveway. It was something quieter than that. It was making sure my daughter never grows up thinking love means letting people ignore what you need. Rachel came up beside me while Sophie kept digging. "Any regrets?" she asked. I watched our girl toss sand everywhere, laughing at nothing in particular. "I regret waiting so long," I told her. "If you've ever had to draw a line with your own family, you know it doesn't come easy, and it rarely comes clean. But sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones standing right in front of you, waiting for you to finally notice them. Take care of the ones who respect your home and your heart."